All right, Paul, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
You are a certified master life coach, NLP practitioner, and have quite a life story, if I may say.
I do. Yeah, let me give you my Batman origin
Yeah, go for
story.
it. Go for it.
Yeah, so like a lot of guys, I was always one of those guys that I like to call sniper daters. Every girl that I ever dated up to a certain point, every girl I ever dated, I was immediately like, oh, she's the one. Oh, I'm gonna marry this girl. And so when I was in high school, I was always pretty good with girls, but I always had that mentality where every girl I dated was the one, and I was going to marry all these girls. And I ended up having that mentality going into the military. When I was 18, I joined the Navy, and about 2 years into that, I met my now ex-wife, and I was home on leave and met her when I was on leave, and we had this long distance relationship for almost a year. And then I convinced her to move back with me to San Diego, and we basically eloped. We barely spent, more than a month like actually in person with each other before we rushed off and ran into marriage. And I was the kind of guy who was like, I want to make sure she's taken care of, and I was getting ready to go on deployment, so I rushed into this marriage with her, and then I was gone for the first 9 months of our marriage. And we ended up being together for 14 years. We ended up being married together for 14 years, and we had two wonderful kids. But man, after the 7 year mark, which is really common for a lot of guys, everything started going downhill. And that last half of the marriage, it was really just misery for me. But I was also the kind of guy who I made vows, and this is what you do. This is how my parents live. My dad's miserable. That's just what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to get married, have kids, and be miserable for the rest of your life. That was my paradigm. And so when we ended up moving out here to Colorado, and that was sort of her exit strategy. And she sort of surprised me with divorce papers. And when she did that, it kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt like a failure. I felt like, this is the first, relationship to fail on my dad's side of the family, because his parents stayed together their whole lives, and my parents are still together. And I was like, I'm a failure, and I really felt like I failed. But at the same time, because the last half of the marriage was so bad, I actually felt, also a tremendous relief.
Mm-hmm.
But I found myself on the dating circuit. This was back in 2014. Found myself back on the dating circuit. I was 50 pounds overweight. I hadn't practiced dating in 15 years. I had no idea what I was doing. It's a completely different landscape. And I found myself on the dating circuit just not knowing what I was doing and just floundering around for about 11 months until another gal sort of took pity on me. I say she was a little bit of a chubby chaser, I think. And so I ended up in a relationship that I probably shouldn't have been in, but like a lot of guys, you go all in on the first girl that's nice to you, and you overlook red flags, and you're not very discerning, and you have this scarcity mindset, like, oh, well, I've been failing this whole time, so I just don't want to be in this pain of being on the dating circuit. So I rushed into that relationship. And about a year into that, I lost all the weight. I decided to take my health seriously, got into fitness, started watching my diet, lost all the weight. But I fell back into the same complacency that I was in with my marriage. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I let that relationship die, and it died much quicker because I fell back on the old programming. I wasn't doing the somewhat attractive stuff that she liked when I first met her. And so about 2 years into that, she had basically mentally checked out. And then 2 years after that, she started acting so bad that I ended up breaking up with her. And then I'm back on the dating circuit this time, and this time I'm in relatively good shape, and it's easy to get dates. But the problem is, like, I'm getting these dates, but I can't keep women around longer than 2 or 3 dates. And so I finally just have this epiphany, like, what am I doing wrong? Why am I repelling women? What is my problem? I realize I'm the common denominator here, right? The two biggest relationships in my life failed, and I can't keep women around. I've got to figure this out. And so I really started diving deep into books about the psychology of attraction, and books like No More Mr. Nice Guy by Dr. Robert Glover, and Understanding Nice Guy Syndrome, and books like How to Be a 3% Man by Corey Wayne, and Atomic Attraction by Christopher Canwell, and stuff like that. And I really started realizing what I was doing wrong, both in the dating side and in the relationship side of, the equation. And then that led me to a men's group on Facebook and connecting with like-minded men and other men. And I think that's really important for our mental health as men. And that's where my podcast came out of. So I have a podcast that I have 3 episodes a week. It's called the Come On Man Podcast. And I've been doing that since 2020. And through that, I started working with men. I got certified as a life coach and an NLP practitioner. And now I work with men who have been in committed relationships and they've let that attraction die because they've fallen in complacency. And I help those men get that attraction back and really reignite that spark in their marriages.
Yeah, there's so many things that pop out to me, but yeah, it's amazing how much I'm learning about this myself, and how all of this really falls into the framework of understanding unconscious or subconscious behaviors, attraction dynamics. That, in my opinion, human beings are 20% words and 80% body language.
Mhm.
And we put way too much emphasis on dialogue, on words, and saying like, well, what do you want? Well, like, I think it's this. And then they do it and it's completely repulsive. Like, but that's what you said you wanted.
Right.
I don't understand. I did wrong. And it's really deeper than that. Yeah. So as far as working with guys though, it's what did like I have a couple things that pop into my mind, but one of the biggest things I think a lot of guys do, like the happy wife, happy life thing, is that there's too much of an emphasis on a disproportionate amount of emphasis on the relationship itself and
Mhm.
not enough on yourself. If you look at the relationship as like you, her, or other partner, and the relationship as 3 separate entities, each of them has to kind of be like watered and tended to and cared for in their own regard. If you put too much emphasis into one, the other two are going to end up getting diminished and damaged along the way. And then I think a lot of men nowadays, with the way things are going, we have too much time on our hands, too much opportunity to spend a disproportionate amount of time focusing on nitpicking every little thing in the relationship, trying to put too much emphasis into it instead of just living your own life and letting that kind of spill over and fill up the relationship from as an extension of that. Curious what your thoughts are in that regard, as far as like what are the major issues that you encounter with men nowadays?
Well, one of the big things that I encounter is that happy wife, happy life paradigm. It's almost ingrained in us, and that's a lot of that goes to nice guy syndrome. And we've had, since World War II, we've had several generations of nice guys now. And Dr. Robert Glover says that that's because we went from an agrarian society where men have, oh, you have it right there. Yeah, perfect.
Right behind me. Yep.
Yeah, he basically says that we came from an agrarian society where men had strong role models. Uncles and grandpas and fathers were around all the time to teach you what masculinity meant. And then we moved to a society of more industrialized, more of an industrialized society where now grandpas and uncles and fathers are now working at the factory for 17 hours a day. And so boys are left with moms, and the moms do the best they can, but a woman can't teach a man how to be a man. She's never done it. And so what happens is boys just aren't getting that masculine role model in their life. And if now, it's even worse now because moms work. And so moms are gone all the time. And so they're either left with female caretakers or they're left with, at school, and teachers are primarily women. And so we just have a lack of masculinity in our lives. And the funny thing is about women is that women are emotional, right? They're sort of driven more by their emotions than men typically are. And so the idea of trying to keep her happy becomes the standard when, your mom's acting one way and one day things are okay. And she lets you play with certain toys, but tomorrow you're playing with the same toys. Now she's mad about it because of something else going on in her life that has no impact on, no bearing on the toys, but now she's using the toys to focus on. So she's mad at you about that. So that sends a confusing message to boys, because boys are like, I don't have any standardization of what's right and what's wrong. I don't have any rules here. It's whatever mom feels like in the moment. So I better keep mom happy. You know, so guys develop this mentality of, oh, we got to keep the women happy, and that carries over into their romantic relationships, where now they're like, oh, I got to keep the wife happy, happy wife, happy life, and their whole goal is to have a problem-free life. And the thing is that women are never inherently happy. So so
Oof.
so having guys own that, it doesn't work. And so guys have to not own their wife's emotions and not really focus on that so much, be more focused on their purpose. And the funny thing is that their wives are actually going to be more happy when you do that.
That's yeah. I mean, that was the statement was like women are inherently happy. I think they are. It's just I think all of us are inherently happy under certain environmental circumstances, and I think I had the previous podcast I had before this one that I'm doing was called Rebuilding the Village. The idea of like if the village was this giant multi-generational machine that would like progress us into the future sociologically, technologically, and it kind of just kept churning out pretty decent people. But at some point in the past couple hundred years, the people coming through started getting like, I won't say worse and worse, but there was problems sinking in. What happened to the village machine?
Mhm.
Why did we lose it? And one of those things, just that dynamic, like you said before, is that we used to, as a society, like go out, work, even in the case of like agrarian farming days, a lot of the times the kids were with mom and dad almost all day working. So at least
Mhm.
they got to watch mom and dad interact with each other. And in the case of women's emotions and things like that, I think it's more that men try to problem solve too much, which in itself is a real like insult to the idea of just letting an emotion work its way through your body, even as guys. Like
Mhm.
sometimes it's like sometimes if you had like if, as a guy, sometimes something terrible happens. Maybe you had like a death in the family or you lost your job. It's like, what do I do? Like just sit there and feel like shit for a little while. It's okay. And then once that passes, then we'll get you up and go figure out what we could do next. But sometimes you got to let it just go through you. But if you go so quick into problem solving mode, especially for women, fastest way to piss somebody off because you're not
Yeah.
letting them get the space to just let them feel what they got to feel. Once you kind of give them the space to be like, feel what you got to feel. Come back to me when you're ready. If you need me to be here and you go somewhere else, do your thing. I'll be here. And then more often than not, once they get through it, they're happy as shit afterwards. Like, oh,
Yeah.
wow, he actually gave me the space. He listened to me. He acknowledged I was feeling what I was feeling rather than say, what can we do to fix this? How can we fix this?
Mhm.
Good luck with that one.
That is the biggest. It's really freeing too when you realize that you don't have to fix her problem, and half the time women don't even want the problem fixed.
They just want to feel. Yeah, they just want to feel like pissed off or whatever, or we're happy or whatever the
Yeah.
emotion. They just want to just let it feel it, go through the system, and move on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When there's a book, a old classic book, it's called, Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus. And it's a
Yes.
real short read. My biggest takeaway from that is that both men and women don't like unsolicited advice, but for different reasons.
Hmm.
And so men, we don't want our wives or girlfriends saying, giving us unsolicited advice because we feel like, hey, I'm the man here. Don't step on my manhood. I got this.
Or I'll
And
figure it out. Yeah.
right, I'll figure it out. And then women don't want that unsolicited advice because they just want you to listen.
Yeah.
But we are so hardwired to problem solve that immediately when we find out, oh, she's discontent in some way, well, let's fix it. We got to make her happy. Instead of just, if you go, oh, you feel like crap today? Yeah, that sucks. Tell me more about it. Why are you
Yeah.
feeling so bad? What happened? Tell me more about it. Don't leave anything out. Oh, man, that's terrible. Yeah, I can see why you feel that way. Then they're just like, oh, I'm just so glad you listened. It's so funny.
Well, it's an evolution. This is where my own personal take is like I'm fascinated with the biology, the evolution of it, the science behind it, because I think it becomes a good buffer. Like in the back of my mind, even now, like I don't have a big following yet, but maybe someday, is like almost this fear of like how many angry feminists are going to come running after me for talking about this stuff. But I think the science and
Oh,
whatnot
I
ends
love
up
it.
as
I love
part
it.
of me loves it. Part of me is like I kind of want it. Other part of me is like I don't know if I'm ready just yet. But I think the science of it does kind of buffer you because like you can get as mad at me as you want, but this is just like where does the line between society and culture and biology of evolution draw? And one of the big ones there is that generally speaking, women are naturally social bonding creatures. They're just what they'll do. And one of those things is being able to be being heard and being emotionally acknowledged by someone else as an indicator that the group still wants you around.
Mhm.
So when they're kind of challenging what you're feeling or not acknowledging what you're feeling, it kind of sets off an alarm. So sometimes with guys to a point, but not as much with women. That you feel like, oh God, something's going wrong. Like they're not acknowledging my emotions, and then it just starts to escalate with more problems. And then him coming to you saying, oh, like let's fix this problem. Like that's not what the thing wants me to do right now. The thing wants me to just listen to me right now. If you have the bandwidth. I mean, you don't have the bandwidth. Even the other thing is to say, you can, in all fairness, sometimes it's like, I love you, honey, but I don't have the time. I don't have the emotional state to handle this right now. I would recommend calling one of your girlfriends. I'm telling you this because I care about you, and I'm not the right person to talk right now or listen to right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's okay. Yeah. Especially if you're at work and you're working on your purpose and your girl calls you in the middle of the workday, like that, you can't drop everything for her all the time. So it's okay to say, you know what, honey, I love you. I want to hear all about this, but I can't right now. But I promise I'll call you later,
Yeah.
or I'll see you when we'll talk about this when we get home. But I have
Yeah.
to get back to work. Like it's okay. She might get mad in the moment, but a lot of guys are so afraid of their wife's emotions, so afraid of her being mad that they won't even do that. It's like, no, it's okay for her to be mad. It's okay, and then the thing is, she'll respect you more if you stick to your guns and you're not a pushover and let her get her way with you. Yeah, one thing I've learned from Dr. Robert Glover. He has another really good book called Dating Essentials for Men.
It's right back here. Yep.
Yeah, that's a classic. I've read that like a dozen times. But one of the things that he talks about is how women don't want you climbing on their emotional roller coaster. They want to know that the guy in the relationship has his feet on the ground. Like that's your job, is to not be impacted by her emotional shitstorms. And I have a client story. So I have a client I'm working with right now, and we met on Tuesday right before Thanksgiving. And one of the things he was worried about was that right before Thanksgiving dinner, his wife, the day of, his wife always gets into her emotions, starts building up a lot of anxiety because she butts head with her mother-in-law so much, his mom. And so she starts overthinking about this so much that she works herself into a frenzy. And by the time she gets to dinner, she's an emotional basket case. And dinner is just horrible for him because he is taking on her emotions. He's taking on his mom's emotions, and he feels caught in the middle, which builds a lot of anxiety in him. And he's like, how am I supposed to deal with this? And I told him, I go, well, first of all, don't own your wife's emotions. Don't own your mom's emotions. They're going to feel how they're going to feel. You can't control that. That's okay. I go, but why don't you have a talk with your wife and just sit her down and say, it's okay that you and my mom don't get along. It's okay that you feel how you feel about my mom. It's okay. Like basically give her permission to not like your mom. Because a lot of women also build up a lot of anxiety. Like, well, what's he going to feel like because I don't like his mom, Don't worry, just give her permission. And then say, if at any time during dinner you're feeling uncomfortable, you're feeling like my mom's, slighting you in some way, she's being passive aggressive, like whatever is making you feel bad, just come and get me. Just come get me, take me to the side, and just tell me about it. And I go, and then the key here is don't try to fix it. Don't say, well, my mom does this, and this is how you should interact. Just listen to her. Just listen to her and validate her feelings, basically. And so he did, and he checked in with me on Friday, and he goes, dude, that worked so much better, because he was so worried about it himself. So he was worried about his wife being worried. And I was like, nah, let it go, man. She just wants to feel like you have her back and that you understand her feelings about it. That's all. Like, she doesn't want you to solve the problem. And so, yeah, he was just so anxious about it, so nervous about it. And it was really causing him a lot of mental anguish, And I was like, nah, it's so much freeing when you realize you don't have to solve the problem. Like, she just wants you to be her rock,
Yeah, and a lot of guys, I think, don't have the emotional grounding, we'll say, to handle that kind of thing, because it kind of stirs up your nervous system, having somebody just like upset in front of you, and there's this urge to try to solve it, try to fix it, try to de-escalate it, do everything you can to just get away from it, because you can't just sit there with it. And I think that's something we've definitely lost. As far as, I was going to ask you what your perception was on what your definition of masculinity is. I think the definition has changed so damn much. But one of the aspects of it being like emotionally grounded such that you can handle somebody else's emotional dysregulation without getting dysregulated yourself.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. So I have a book that I just released. It's a part of a whole series on masculinity, and it's based off of a friend of mine. His name is R.P. Thor. He wrote a book called A Dominant Masculine Presence. I want to say 2 years ago. And so he invited all of us in to write a follow-up series based on his book. And so he actually lists out 7 skills of what he calls is 7 skills of a dominant masculine presence and what really makes you a dominant masculine man. And so those 7 skills are physicality, psychology, presence, problem solving when necessary, right? Prosperity, power, and passion. And so if you can, embody those 7 traits, and even he even says, like, if you get really good with 4 of those traits, like, you are going to have a more dominant masculine presence than most guys out there, because most guys don't have any of that kind of stuff, you know. But a lot of that, I mean, a lot of it takes work, right? We talk about in the space, in the red pill space, muscles, money, game, and frame, right? Those are the core 4 qualities. And I think as long as you can work on those types of things, frame being big, the big one, your mental frame is paramount. If you, that's like the first thing you need to work on. But yeah, most guys don't have that. Most guys have no concept of mental frame, and they're constantly operating in their wife's or girlfriend's frame. That's when you're trying to make her happy all the time and putting her on a pedestal and trying to do all this kind of stuff for her, and you're making her your center of your world. You're operating in her frame. You're basically a supporting character in your life story as opposed to the main character. So
how would we outline what a healthy mental frame is for a guy walking into a relationship, or a guy in a relationship having difficulty with that?
I am a big proponent of having men be their own mental point of origin. It's something I've learned. I've learned from I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Rollo Tomasi. He wrote a book called The Rational Male. He gets a bad rap.
Too. Yep.
Oh, okay, yeah. I work with Rollo. He invited me on his panel show a couple of years ago called Rule Zero on Saturday mornings, and so I've worked with Rollo a lot. I've studied I've read all of his books. They're really phenomenal. You got to be careful though, and I got to be careful saying this because I know this guy too, right? But the guy who read his first 2 books, or maybe even the first 3 books, his name is Sam Bada. He's a good dude, but the way he reads The Rational Male for the audiobook makes it really sound condescending and cynical. But that's not how Rollo speaks. If you ever listen to Rollo speak, he doesn't sound that way. And so it's almost better to read the paperback version of those books. But one of the things that Rollo talks about is men making themselves their own mental point of origin. What's that mean? It means you put yourself first. You figure out what you want out of life. What's your vision for life? What's your vision for your relationships? It's kind of the concept of when you're on an airplane and the stewardess to say, okay, in the event of an emergency, you have to put your oxygen mask on first before helping other people, because if you can't breathe, you can't help anybody else, right? So you got to help yourself first. You got to put yourself first. And the funny thing is that when guys do that, they put themselves first. They figure out what their goals are. They figure out what their purpose in life is. Women typically just want to join that lifestyle. They want to be with a guy that they can support. Typically, like that's natural feminine energy. But most guys won't allow that because we've not been raised that way. We've been raised to, make her our priority and put her on a pedestal and do everything to make her like us, And so it's almost counterintuitive, but that's almost like it goes with what naturally happens in a relationship dynamic.
Yeah, that's the tough part, is like I'm trying to get my own perspective on how to frame that while keeping space for like career women. But even then, I the more I hear of this, not that I'm trying to go like full like MGTOW, red pill, the whole 9 yards, this idea of we gave everybody the option to do what they wanted to do, and it seems like more often than not, women, I don't know the exact statistics, but they're gravitating towards saying, was the career worth it? Like, if I'm in my mid 30s, and I've had a lot of people I've interacted with over the years that I've seen more and more of having fertility issues, having, kind of regretting the career, or doubling down on the career in the hopes that maybe if I just go up a little higher on the ladder, even myself, like I've definitely been in that case of like, maybe if I do this job, I'll be happy. Maybe if I do this job, I'll be happy. Maybe if I do this job, I'll be happy. And you realize like it's the same problem every time. It's like you don't feel fulfilled until you basically say, I'm going to pick something I like, I'm good at, that I can be generous with and give back. Like currently I do massage therapy, a lot of medical massage therapy.
Mm.
I have an engineering degree and I could have been an engineer, but for a variety of reasons, I ended up getting into the health and wellness space, got into personal training, segued to massage therapy. But I really love the fact that like people will come to me with physical body pain and I can help fix it for them.
Mm.
Like that, beyond the money, that is just a massively gratifying feeling to have. Like you have pain, you have a confusion, you have a problem. I'm going to help address it and fix it for you. And then from there, it's like, well, I could have been a finance guy or an engineer, a banker, made a shit ton of money, and I would have been miserable because I felt like I had no purpose. I feel like I'm not giving back in some regards. It was something too bigger than myself. But I think it's possible, like men and women, but women too, falling down this. I don't say it's a trap necessarily, but the idea of the career first and then the family and everything second. And then by the time you hit your like early to mid 30s, all of a sudden it's getting more difficult to have kids. You have fertility issues. You're stressed out of your mind trying to keep up with bills and whatnot. And then you end up regretting it somewhere along the way and wondering what went wrong. Well, what went wrong is you kind of flipped it along the way.
Yeah. Well, that's almost like, the idea of if I get here, I'll be happy. If I make this much money, I'll be happy. That's if you have that kind of concept, right? That happiness comes from an external source or achieving a certain goal, you'll never be happy. It's like happiness comes from within. That's another reason why mental frame is so important. Because there's a lot of guys. You mentioned the MGTOW space. A lot of guys in the MGTOW community, they have this concept of I want a woman to bring me peace. If she doesn't bring me peace, then
Yeah.
then she can't be in my life. It's like women don't bring peace; they bring drama. That's what they do. And so you got to understand that a woman will never be your peace. You have like peace starts up here in your mind, in your mental frame, and if once you know how to handle her drama in a constructive way, right? Like handling shit tests, there's different techniques like agree and amplify and act indifferent and amuse mastery and fogging and all that fun stuff. Once you have fun with it and you're like, okay, bring it on. Bring on the shit test. Like I'm having fun with it. I like I'm already a happy person. And no matter what your emotional crap's doing is not going to impact me. That's when you're truly free, is when you realize that it starts up here. And like you said, yeah, maybe I could have made more money, but you're more fulfilled doing a job that gives you a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That's what really a lot of guys are missing. They've spent their whole lives doing what they've been told. That's one of the reasons why I have my book on paradigms, is because we have certain paradigms and beliefs that are usually ingrained in us from our childhood, from our parents, our upbringing. And so we follow that almost like unconsciously. And then we realized, oh, none of that was true. none of that was true. So.
Well, yeah, it's interesting with the bringing peace thing too. I think there's a deeper layer to that. A lot of I think guys don't fully grasp. It's like drama is a nice way of saying like emotional polarity. I think it's like, I was just thinking about this a second ago. It's like 50 Shades of Grey wouldn't have sold as well as it did if there wasn't some kind of like emotional polarity going on in there that just kind of like stirs up the emotions and brings them down, and stirs up the emotions and brings them down for at a certain particular cadence. But the drama thing, it's like women will bring problems if you don't have the groundedness and communication skills with which to sort them out with her.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like the shit test is one thing, for example, but sometimes, like I remember hearing this, it was a Jordan Peterson thing, that he was talking about how women just have a much higher natural sensitivity to perturbations in the environment. Very, very high sensors compared to guys. They're looking for lots and lots of little things. This is why they're really good at picking up on details of everything. We just don't. We're just like, is there a bear attacking me? No, cool. I'll just sit down and chill out for now because I'm fine. For her, it's like, well, all the little things in the environment that could cause damage to her or children, she's constantly on the lookout. Totally fair. She should be. And then the challenge then becomes, can you create a dynamic in the relationship such that when her alarms go off, that you can help her sort through what's actually a threat versus just nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that drama, it comes in the form of like, everything's driving her nuts. Like, no, you got to just sit down and just like, this is not this, not this, not this. Oh, here's the problem. Okay, cool. Let's address it. Cool. But if you don't create that space to let her sort through it, it's just going to escalate, make it worse, and then causes problems in the relationship.
Yeah. And that's really how women solve problems, right? They speak through their emotions, and then as they're speaking out their emotions, they want to know how they feel about those emotions that they're speaking about. And then they feel better, like after they get it off their chest. That's one of the reasons why therapy works really well for women, because therapy is often really designed with that dynamic in mind. Like, well, tell me how you feel about that. What are your feelings? Speak through your feelings. Therapy doesn't necessarily, I mean, there's certain good therapists out there, but for men, it doesn't work the same way. A lot of therapists treat men the same way as women, but men do much better with action, taking actions with things. It's just because our minds are wired differently. But women are just almost constantly neurotic. Another Rollo maxim is that women craving indignation, right? That they crave it, and it's like they crave it, and if they don't have it, they'll create it. So as long as you understand that, and sort of have a little bit of have fun with it, it's not going to impact you as a guy. It's almost like a lot of guys just like take that stuff on, they get annoyed by it. It's like, don't get annoyed by it. That's just how they are. Women are just different, and just
Yeah, it's a shit testing thing, and it's in total fairness too. It's like if you had to take on the burden of creating a child inside your body for 9 months, followed by breastfeeding it and raising it, taking care of it for 15, 20 years, you'd be really fucking picky too if you had to.
yeah.
And in that case, like, yeah, you're going to want to really make sure the guy you have with you is worth his shit. So it's totally fair that you're going to have to put him through some tests once in a while, within reason.
Yeah.
But don't like people taking it off as like the idea of having that kind of groundedness to know the difference between, is this actually an emergency or are you just in your feelings right now? Maybe if you are, it's totally fine. But just, and you can kind of say, that's what you say, like, all right, I don't have the mental bandwidth right now. Maybe if you talk to one of your girlfriends, you'll feel better afterwards. Or versus like, we haven't paid the rent in 3 months. And you're like, okay, this might be an emergency. We should actually sit down and talk about this. You're justified in being upset about that right now.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be.
Yeah. A good way, I think a good way that guys can handle that kind of stuff, right? They say that communication is the key to a healthy relationship. I disagree. I think genuine desire is a key to a healthy relationship, but communication's good in conflict resolution or in problem solving, right? So if it's a situation where, yeah, your girl's bitching because the bills aren't getting paid, and she's all worried about, are we going to be able to make ends meet? That's a valid concern.
Absolutely.
Like sometimes when your girl's complaining about stuff, a lot of guys immediately either want to get pissed at her and blow her off. But it's like, you ever take a step back and ask yourself, does she have a good point here? Maybe she has a good point.
Mm-hmm.
So a good communication model I learned from a friend of mine named Paul Benjamin. He has a YouTube channel called Apex Mindset. He came up with an acronym called LUCA, which is listen, understand, clarity, action. And so when you sit down with your girl, you listen to what she's saying. You try to understand what she's saying. If you don't understand it, you ask clarifying questions to get clarity on what she's saying. And then you, as the leader in the relationship, after you've acquired all the information, you've thought about everything, now you come up with an action plan. Okay, I hear what you're saying. You feel this way. This is a concern for you. Am I understanding that right? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, this is how I think we should take action on this. And this is what I'm going to do. As long as you do that, you're communicating from a position of authority and leadership. She's going to actually feel more safe and secure in the relationship. And that's all she wants at the end of the day. Like, does my man have shit handled? I want a man that has shit handled, and he clearly has shit handled,
Well, what's funny is too about the genuine burning desire thing, or genuine desire, I think you said it was, or
genuine desire. Yeah.
Genuine desire.
I think like if you hear anyone say genuine burning desire, I think Rich Cooper added the burning to it, but
probably. But even that comes as a byproduct of healthy communication. I remember hearing this good thing. It was like, sex is better when the bills are paid. And the idea being that like when you don't have things to worry about, you get to relax more. And when you're more relaxed, even something like sexual desire is a parasympathetic phenomenon. You have to be relaxed in order to get. Your body's not going to give you a boner if you're being chased by a lion. There's no fucking point. Like, it knows the difference. For both of you though too, it's like if there's stress in the household in the form of something that hasn't been resolved yet and needs to be talked about or figured out, whatever, could be the bills, could be the undigested frustration between the two of you, whatever it is, it's going to affect other areas, including your sex life.
It could, but sex is also a tremendous stress reliever too, and often women don't want the problem solved. So as long as they can express their emotions and they can talk it out and you understand where they're coming from, oftentimes they'll want to have sex just because that'll make them feel better in the moment.
Yeah, there's the communication again. It's like knowing the
Yeah,
difference between what to talk about, what's actually a problem, what's not a
yeah.
problem, and going from there. What are your thoughts? I'm just curious on like men, masculine, women, feminine, but then like a men 90% masculine, 10% feminine, women 90% feminine, 10% masculine. Because like what I'm big into is Connor Beaton's work, the men's works, John Wineland, things like that. Also, just looking at like different frames and different perspectives, and the idea being that like yes, as a man, you're going to be mostly in your masculine,
Hmm.
but being able to like let yourself feel feelings once in a while. If you have a lot of grief on your chest, something bad happened, a lot of shame about what you did, like bottling that up and just powering through it is not going to be a good idea. And having the ability to create some kind of frame, it could be with your guy friends, whatever, to say like, I wish I could solve this problem, but the problem is I just feel like shit, and I need to
Hmm.
just be in my feminine a little bit by maybe be like crying a little bit or being a little emotional, whatever it is, and then getting back into masculine and vice versa.
Well, yeah, there's that whole concept of you got a masculine side and a feminine side. I definitely think unless unless you are of a certain persuasion, LGBTQRS type person, then yeah, typically most men need to be more in their masculine side. But a big problem with society the way it is and the way we have a masculinity crisis, a lot
Mm-hmm.
of guys just aren't. They're not. They're
Oh yeah,
mostly
yeah,
they're
yeah. Talk about like the
mostly
healthy person, not like
yeah.
every, not the yeah. Currently, a lot of guys are definitely too.
Yeah. So there's a lot of guys are raised to be defective women nowadays. So there are a lot of guys are a little too far on their in their feminine
Yeah.
energy. And so in order to solve that, they definitely need to learn more a little more stoicism, a little more emotional control. And I don't mean emotional suppression, because we're not robots, and suppression's not good. If you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
constantly suppress those emotions, that you're going to end up just like blowing up at somebody, or
Yep.
shooting up a school, or whatever. That's typically what happens, right? So that's not good either. So yeah, what we like to talk about in the red pill space is, there's a time and a place. There's a time and a place for it. It's good to have a good group of men that you can go to, talk to about your problems. This gets a lot of bad press, but we often say women don't care about your problems, right? They wait at the finish line and bang the winners. And so the thing is that I personally think that women want to care. They think that they should care. They even think that they do care, but they're just evolutionarily wired not to really care about our problems as much. And so if you're constantly going to your girl with your problems and crying and being vulnerable and all that, all the stuff that we're told that we're supposed to do, and that's healthy, it gives women the ick. And so it's much better to not necessarily do that so much with your girl, in my opinion, and it is to have a good group of guys that you can go to and problem solve and get through those things and work through solutions to problems. But we're also, you can't do that all the time. Like sometimes you're going to share stuff with your girl, you're not even going to think about it, you're going to just on autopilot word vomit something, and that's okay too. I just recommend for guys that if you catch yourself doing that, that you sort of add a solution to the end of that. Because most women,
Yes.
as
Yeah.
as long as you have a solution to your
Mm-hmm.
problem, most women are like, okay, cool, he's got his stuff handled, I don't have to worry about it. But as soon as
Yeah.
you start emotionally dumping on your girl, at first she might be okay with it. At first she's like, oh, you poor thing, I'll be there for you. But if you keep doing that, it literally erodes attraction over time, because she's like, God, I wish he would handle his shit. He can't handle his shit. I have
Yeah.
to be the man here. And then if
Yeah.
she has to put the pants on and be the man in the relationship, now she doesn't trust your leadership abilities, and that erodes attraction. It's just not a good thing.
Yeah. And sometimes dealing with your shit in those moments is just saying out loud, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to find somebody that can help me.
Yeah,
And
even
just,
if it's
yeah,
as
and even
simple as
that.
that.
And I think a lot of guys fall into this sense of like, if I don't know what to do, I can't handle the uncertainty, so I'll just bottle it up, bottle it up, bottle up. So to
Yeah.
speak. But sometimes like the uncertainty is like, I'll just go talk to my guy friends and see if they know somebody. And if they don't know somebody, I'll go talk to the guys at work. If they don't know somebody, I'll find somebody to help me with this problem, and I'll keep her in the loop, depending on what it is that she wants to keep involved in helping it out. But like you said, it shouldn't be like an emotional dumping is like what maybe a baby does or a toddler does,
Yeah.
and it's
It's what
totally
women do.
validated.
Like women love to vent, right? Venting is actually a kind of a feminine activity. So if
Yeah.
guys are venting too much, her monkey brain is like, he's acting like a woman right now. And
Mhm.
you know, so yeah, it's just one of those things that it's not what a lot of what we talk about in Red Pill. It's like, maybe it should be this way. Maybe she should be more caring, but that's just not what is. So Red Pill is not about what should be. It's about what is and how to deal with it. How do you deal with that and maintain a healthy relationship if that's what you want?
All right, well, I'm curious. So we'll touch on that with the men's groups. What's your thoughts on getting guys into either men's groups or creating their own men's groups? My own experience is you need that external bullshit detector. I guess sometimes like we get drawn into our own nonsense of just like, yeah, this makes sense to sit around and play video games and smoke weed all day. It's rationally, internally, this makes sense. And you have
Yeah.
a group of guys who are just like, get the fuck up, we're going to the gym. You need
Yeah.
to do something with your life. And you're like, oh God, thank you. I needed to hear that from external. But a lot of times I think guys tend to isolate a lot more naturally, kind of retreat in their own little private caves and then not engage with the world and not engage socially and things like that, and then wonder why these problems start to spiral out of control. But men's groups is definitely one of those things we can start integrating more of to get guys to rise up together.
Yeah. Well, and I got that idea from No More Mr. Nice Guy and Dating Essential for Men. Dr. Robert Glover was really big on men connecting with like-minded men.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize this in my own marriage. And I recognize it in my dad. I see my dad do it. I see other guys do this all the time. But what a lot of guys do is they have a good circle of guy friends, and then they get into a relationship, and then they let their guy friends fall by the wayside, and they have no friends.
Yeah.
What's his name? Milani, stand-up comedian. I can't think of his name, but there's a comedian. He talks about how men don't have friends. Men have wives, and wives have friends, right? And then they have to interact with their wives' friends' husbands, but those aren't your friends. You know what I mean? And so there's that kind of dynamic. Or guys have their what I call forced friends, where you have coworkers, but they're not
Mm-hmm.
really good solid friends. You can't really talk to them about your real problems. And so guys just sort of dump everything on their wives. They're like, oh, well, she's my partner, right? She's my partner. She's supposed to be there for me. And so they do that, and that kills attraction over time. And then they wonder why their wives won't bang them anymore. And so they just sort of get this lone wolf mentality that no one in life cares. No one cares about me. I'm just going to keep it to myself. I'm going to, like you said, smoke weed, drink, bottle it up, right? Escapism. I'm going to play video games. And they never actually find an outlet for that. And that's why I think it's important to find a good group of guys. Now, some guys might go to their church group, right? They might go to their church group, which could be good depending on the church group, I suppose. But a lot of those guys are having the same problems in their marriage, and they don't know what the hell they're doing either. They haven't studied sexual dynamics. They don't know. They'll go, well, why don't have you talked to your wife about that? Like, she doesn't care, bro. Right? That's why I'm coming to you. So what I prefer is guys getting with other guys that are studying this stuff. That's why I created my group, the beer club, I call it. And it's only $10 a month, but there's about 50 guys in there, and they're all guys that study this stuff all the time. They know exactly what you're going through because we've all been through it. And so when you bring a problem to this group, they are very much understanding. They know exactly what you're going through, and they've done it themselves, so they can help you navigate the situation a little bit better. And then also, yeah, they're not just in there talking about smoking weed and, wasting their lives. They're in there, getting better with their fitness. We have 2 guys in there that have cured themselves of type 2 diabetes just because they lost so much weight, and they're holding each other accountable, and they're eating better now. It's much better to get with a group of guys that are working on themselves, I think. They say that we're a product of the 5 people we hang around with the most.
Mm-hmm.
If you're with 5 people that are all in debt and complaining about their finances, you're going to be the 6th one. If all the friends you hang out with are fat bastards that all have health problems because they drink too much, they eat too much, they do too much drugs or whatever, like, you're going to be the 6th one. So why don't you get with a group of guys that are trying to get better in life? relationships, their health, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm a big proponent of guys doing that.
Yeah, like the OG men's group was like the hunting party back in our caveman days. And
Yeah.
the dynamics of the world today is such that like you had time to like you go on the hunt, you're out for a couple of days, maybe a couple hours, a couple of days, and you had time to kind of just like sit there and process through your thoughts and whatever feelings came up. And by the time you came back, it was also it was that book. It's Esther Perel. It's Mating in Captivity, talking about how like we need space from each other. We need like places to go. And I wonder how much of that's eroded in the past, I don't know, like 100 years or so, as a accidental or intentional byproduct of things like feminism that like they took away a lot of the men's spaces.
Yeah.
Like my father, when I was growing up, every Tuesday he played bowling. And when I was growing up, he's like, he just likes bowling. Like, no, that's his guy time. That's him with his bros just recharging for the week after a long weekend with the kids, whatever. And that was like, it could have been bowling, could have been softball, could have been baseball, whatever the fuck it was. Like it's some activity with a bunch of other guys in a like-minded space that you're just reconnecting with, shooting the shit, talking your problems up, and culting your bullshit and getting better and then going back and tackling the world again.
Yeah, that was the idea of groups like the Masons, right? The Elks Club, the all those like lodges. Men would have places where they would go and smoke cigars and drink and talk to guys about guy stuff away from the women. Women would have knitting clubs or pinochle or whatever they did, and people like their relationships lasted longer back then. They almost like they gave themselves time to miss each other.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's super healthy. It's healthy for men to connect with other men. It's good for wives and girlfriends to connect with other women. Although I do recommend that if your wife is going to be in a woman's friends group, that it's with other married women.
I was just about to say.
in healthy relationships and not hanging out with their hoe friends that are single, or they're recently divorced women. That's a big problem with women hanging out with all their divorced friends is it's the same thing of the rule of 5, right? Like if all your female friends are divorced, they're like crabs in a bucket, and they're gonna to sit there and talk about how miserable you aren't you miserable with him? Doesn't he make you miserable? I can't believe you're helping him. I can't believe you make him sandwiches. Like, how dare you? It's like serving a man, doing anything for the expressed pleasure of a man is a cardinal sin to feminism, right? Like, oh, you're doing laundry anyway, but now because you're doing laundry and you're throwing his stuff in, now all of a sudden it's slavery. Like, get out of here. Like, stop. Stop that.
Well, yeah, it was interesting learning about this, I guess like in the more like scientific, biological, evolutionary perspective, this idea of how it's like this retro framing of history that like women back in the day, cooking, cleaning, sewing, child rearing. Like why? Because they were forced to. Like no, because those were usually multitask oriented jobs. That you could this is like a fascinating way to look at it. It's like if you had a house and like maybe like a fire pit going in the corner doing something like that, and you're like on a sewing machine which was also raised off the floor so you can like sit there and working on it while the kids are nearby, and maybe you have something like had a fire pit going, and then also you had little toddlers crawling and the crawler starts going towards the fire, you could stop what you were doing, go pick them up, say no fire, move them away, come back to what you're doing. You can bounce between different tasks simultaneously to get more things done. Whereas again, back in the day, OG hunting parties for men, it was like, I can't bring my 2-year-old with me to go hunting elk, or he's going to fucking die, or he's going to hold us back. And we really need to kill this thing so we can survive.
Right.
And then the feeling is like, well, we're not hunting anymore. It's like, yeah, but back here we are. Like monkey brain still thinks so like we have to go out and chase some fucking woolly mammoths and like elk and buffalo and shit like that. It's not that much of a different thing as it was back then.
Yeah. Well, I think you sort of mentioned it in passing earlier, but you were talking about like boss women now, right? Boss women, women making more money and all that kind of stuff. It's still in our minds, both men and women, right? Women typically want a guy that makes more money than them, but a lot of women are making more money now, and so there's a lot of relationships where women are making more money than the men, and so then that creates a interesting dynamic because now guys are feeling sort of insecure because they're not the major breadwinner now.
Yeah.
And so then women will latch onto that and sort of like browbeat you for not making more money and stuff. But it's like someone asked me, I was on another podcast and someone asked me how I felt about that. And I go, look, in a relationship dynamic between men and women, if she's making more money, it's not a big deal if you don't make it a big deal. If you set the tone and lead in that relationship, that's all she really wants. Because even the bossiest of boss women, at the end of the day, they've been making 200, 300 decisions a day. They come home, the last thing they want to do is make the decisions on what's for dinner. So if you're the one that's like, hey, we're going to go get steak tonight, go grab your shoes, and you are taking the lead in that, she's going to be like, oh, that sounds great, and relax into her feminine and start acting like a feminine woman. I have a friend like that. He's I call him one of my 3% brothers, but he lives down in this town called Montrose, and he's dating this gal who's a multimillionaire. He doesn't make millions of dollars, but she just loves that he will not let her get her way in the relationship. She'll start being all bossy and start, hey, we're going to go here, we're going to do this. And he's going to go, huh? No, we're going to go to this restaurant. And he'll just do whatever he's going to do. And she's like, I can't believe you did that. And then she fucking loves it, So it's just because he lets her, relax into her feminine when they're together. And that's all she really wants at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's funny. I just had to Google this. I remember hearing this on a podcast the other day. That I don't know the exact statistics, but it's like men who make less money than women are 10% more likely to take drugs for erectile dysfunction.
Really?
Something. The stats are a little bit whippy, but it is like a correlation of like if she's making more, the odds of you having like. But aside from your friend though, I think that's more of a power dynamic where you say like, well, I am only defined by my income.
Yeah.
So well, then it's going to really affect you. That's really kind of your fault saying that you're letting it affect you. Whereas your friend, the 3%er, is just like, she makes millions, but I still call the shots. And she likes it. And he's probably like got the angriest boners ever. And she fucking loves it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. She just loves the dominance and that she can't, he lets her be the woman because she's actually acting like a man all day at work.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to act like a man in the relationship. So yeah, that just comes back to mental frame, having a strong mental frame. It doesn't really matter what she's doing. It doesn't matter how much money she's making. It's like, no, I'm the man in the relationship. I set the tone and I lead,
Yeah, and just given the bigger thing being like letting that be the option, I think for a lot of women.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of pushback through. It's again back to what we said in the beginning. It's like 20% words, 80% body language. There's a lot of pushback through words in that statement of saying men should lead relationships, but then the body language tends to be that they generally like it. They say like, this sounds like bullshit, but let's go along with it anyway.
Yeah. Do you know have you ever heard of Ross Jeffries? You know who Ross Jeffries is?
No, not familiar.
Ross Jeffries is like, he's like an OG pickup artist from like the early 2000s. If you ever read the book, The Game, he's talked about in the book, gotcha. The Game. And he's the guy who pioneered using neuro-linguistic programming in pickup artistry. And he was on a talk show one time and he said it really well. He goes, there's things that women say they want, there's things that women think they want, but then there's things that women actually respond to. And so as men studying sexual dynamics, it's more important to pay attention to what they respond to and not listen to what they say so much.
Yeah. And this creates this, back a second earlier, the village thing about like the giant machine is, I would gather even in that capacity with like pickup artistry and things like that, it's like I'm thinking of, one thing that's popped in my mind is hookup culture, which I think is, as far as I'm aware, is still pretty much a big problem nowadays. But it's
a problem for people that don't like it, but guys that are hooking up all the time, they love it.
They love it. Yeah. Well, on the grander scale of the massive amount of men who are like falling behind and not getting any action or any kind of meaningful relationships, problematic in that regard. But the idea being that like it's really more on both sides that the village society is on a multi-generational level is creating men and women that are responding to these things in the first place. Like a woman who has a very healthy father figure in her life, who knows her value, her worth, who's like, she treated her well, but also didn't litigate with bullshit. She's not going to like fall for some sleazy pickup artist to the same degree as the woman who had no idea. And she's like, that's when there's no barriers in place to kind of, then you say like, why does this keep happening? It's like, because nobody taught her. Or in the case of the guy, it's like, why is being a pushover not attractive? Like, nobody taught you what actually works from a guy who's actually in his healthy masculine frame and shows you what works.
Yeah.
And then it's just kind of, this is where it goes more to like, well, let's talk about how we think we feel versus how we actually feel versus what we actually respond to.
Yeah. Well, that actually, speaking of the book, The Game, that was one of the things that I found fascinating because you would think, oh, a pickup artist, these guys are so good, they can get any girl they want. No,
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 no. They would specifically target certain women that they thought would
yeah,
be more receptive to what they were doing. So they were looking for girls that were dressing sluttier, that had the big hoop earrings, right? Because the bigger the hoop, the bigger the hoe, they say. And and so they would be targeting women that they're like, okay, I'm going after this chick. But a girl that was dressed like a prude, that was dressed like a Mennonite or something, like they wouldn't be trying to do their pickup artist stuff on there because they knew that they would be wasting their time, you know. And
yeah.
then, what else did you say? Oh, you were saying that guys who are like, well, not being a pushover, they don't know any better because they never had a guy tell them that. That's one of the reasons why a big problem I think that guys do is they go to women to ask for dating advice and relationship advice. Women are inherently awful at giving dating and relationship advice. And one of the biggest reasons for that, and it's not their fault, is that women are almost utterly incapable of telling men what gets them hot, what gets them sexually
Hmm.
attracted. They can only describe relationship and dating from the comfort love perspective, which is the beta side of hypergamy, right?
Hmm.
So the pushover, so guys go and listen to what women say. They go, oh, she wants flowers and chocolates and to be put on a pedestal, and she wants to be comforted and told that she's pretty, and all this kind of stuff. And so guys lead with that, and then wonder why they end up in the friend zone. It's
Yeah.
because that's not what makes her sexually attractive. So it's much better to get dating and relationship advice from guys that know what they're talking about, right? You don't ask a fish how to fish, you ask a fisherman.
Yeah, minus the pedestal, those are not bad things to have if you also mostly pair it with like a strong masculine frame.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I like giving you flowers, and also I'm taking us out to dinner, and also we're doing that, whatever it may be, and in a healthy way. There's I don't know if you're familiar with Nick. I think his name is Nick Freitas. Nick Freitas. He's I think he's a senator from Virginia or West Virginia. He's got a whole podcast, pretty popular dude, conservative talking point, old school kind of guy, ex-military. And I remember he was talking about this thing, how he had a military buddy of his that Nick himself, he was married, he was expecting his first daughter, and he had a military buddy who was just an absolute like master of the game, just like a different woman every single night without fail. And he went to him and he said, like, listen, I'm going to be having a daughter soon. What do I have to do to make sure she doesn't fall for guys like you?
Mm-hmm.
And the guy said, like, dead serious. The guy said, like, tell her you love her and make sure you mean it so that when I tell her, she knows the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, holy shit. It's just like
Yeah.
but yeah, this is something that's like this effect. What you said, like they're targeting women that are trying to dress a certain way, and I think there is a certain element. I see this in the gym nowadays. Like it's almost. I'm 35. I enjoy. If I was younger, I wouldn't be able to work out in today's day and age. I'd be just walking around like a constant, would have to be sitting down the entire time. But but even in the gym nowadays, it's just getting like skimpier and skimpier and skimpier. But the argument is like, well, that's just us being comfortable, and it's like okay, but really though, to comfortable to a point. Like I like wearing shirts that kind of show up my biceps, but I don't walk around in tank tops 24/7 showing up my every inch of me. There's like a way to kind of say like dressing provocatively and appropriately, but also kind of balancing it versus when you're saying like I'm wearing just the absolute tightest booty short Lululemon pants I can find and wondering why guys are staring at me. Like, well, what the fuck do you expect?
No, that's bullshit, right? Like women know.
Well, that's the whole point. Yeah,
Yeah,
like they know what they're doing, but then the whole idea is like, well, just because I enjoy
they say
dressing
that
this
we're
way.
wearing this for us, okay? Because it makes us. No, they're not. No, they're not.
If everyone was blind, you wouldn't be wearing that shit.
They're wearing that. They're wearing that to get male attention because it's attention is the coin of the realm in girl world, and that's what they're after. They're looking for attention, and then it's only a problem when they get attention from guys that they don't like. When they get attention from guys they do like, this is exactly why they're wearing the low cut, cleavage showing, racer back, so that it's one of those things where guys listen to too much of what women say and they don't pay attention to what they respond to and what they actually do.
Yeah, the whole idea being it's even fair to say it's like if you want to dress either way because you like the attention, fucking own it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Like by all means, if I ever go down to the beach, I'll wear like the shirts I wear nowadays. I'm in pretty good shape. I dress like they're a little tighter than usual because I like showing off the work I've done. And
Yeah.
everyone's like, don't you think it's ridiculous? Like, no, I have nice biceps. I want people to say, fuck it, I'm not going to hide from that fact.
Yeah.
But dressing around like, like super, super, what's this good quote I heard? Remember, it was like, guys want a good girl who's bad for them, and girls want a bad boy who's good for them.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Right.
Yeah. And it's totally fair. Just like we've talked about this a lot with, I've had like a lot of conversations with my patients around this. It's like a lot of conversations around like, like sex and things. I have with my patients, the idea of like women, sex is better when the bills are paid. But also women like the idea of the guy who can demonstrate, restraint, control. He should be dangerous, but not to you. He should be like, a threat, but not to you. And then that threat kind of comes out in bed and things like that. And certainly maybe it's like soft, caring, huddling. There's a good thing by Ali Wong, who's a comedian. Just talking about this is so funny. It was like she was making this point, talk about how like in sex, like in the beginning it needs to be nice and slow and caring and sentimental, but at the end it needs to get like really aggressive and almost borderline, just a little bit, but with consent completely.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get like banned on YouTube for saying that. But
have you ever read the book My Secret Garden by Nancy Friday?
No.
So it came out in the 60s. This lady, Nancy Friday, she was talking, the book starts off where she's talking to some friends at dinner, husbands and wives and stuff. They're all together at a group dinner, and she's like, I've got this idea for a book where women tell me their sexual fantasies, and I put it in this book, and women can be really open and honest. And this lady's husband looks over at, he goes, what a stupid idea for a book. Women don't need sexual fantasies, do you, honey? And the wife goes, no, like, of course not. Like, we're not sexual creatures, all this kind of stuff, right? So then at that moment she knew it has to be anonymous or women aren't going to be honest, right?
Yeah.
Because women are wired for reputation protection. They don't want everyone to think that they're slutty sleuths, but they deep down they enjoy sex, right? So
totally fair. Yeah.
So she put out ads in papers nationwide asking for women to write in their sexual fantasies, totally anonymous. And all these women wrote in just feeling, oh, I could finally get this off my chest. And it is some of the dirtiest, filthiest shit you've ever read. And I read that book. I couldn't even finish it. It was that disgusting, right? And it wasn't even good disgusting. It was like,
add that to my Amazon list now.
I can't even utter it on YouTube. It's so filthy, but it gives you an insight into the minds of women. And there's a huge percentage of women that really, they like the grape fantasy thing, and it's like, you don't have to go that far, but when you realize that women really, a vast majority of women really like that dominance in bed, like even if it's as simple as like holding her arms above her head, right? Pinning them down and then like whispering in her ear, like dirty stuff, right? Like, oh, you love it when I do this, right? Or whatever. Even if they don't respond to that, they're internalizing it, and it makes the experience better for them because they just love being ravaged, like it's almost like in the way that women described it in the book, a lot of the women described it was they like the idea that they were so attractive to you that you couldn't withhold your own masculine urges and you had to take them right there. They love that.
Yeah. I remember talking to some I had some ex-girlfriends who were dating at the time, and I used to ask them like what do you like, what don't you like, this and that, and they'd always say like, I love the idea that like you almost can't control yourself around me. It's like, I like getting into that feeling too, but it's just it kind of feels good to kind of like let loose in a way. Yeah, it's nice to walk around with you all day and have like I can see guys staring, catching an eye at you or things like that, or I just like the way you're dressed, having and then it's just like when you kind of like just let it loose. And I think a lot of guys I've seen along the way I was guilty of this when I was younger, was like what's the word, like a penis inadequacy, dick size inadequacy, thinking like, oh, if only I had a 9-foot elephant dick, then maybe she'd like nothing even close to really like maybe to a point, but like it's so much more about like your frame, your presence. Are you in good shape? Are you confident? Can you like say in your masculine? That's just gonna do fucking wonders.
Oh, God, I think guys, especially with like the free access to prawn, right? They have this overinflated idea of what their size should be.
Yes.
But there was a study that was done several years ago. It was the largest urology study on penis size ever conducted. And they did like thousands of penises all around the world. And what they found was that penis size only varies by like a couple of centimeters for the most part. Like there's like an average size, which is like 5 3/4 or something like that. And then every other dick out there is within just a couple of centimeters of that. And there are some outliers on either side. There's some, micro penises and there's some huge ones, right? But they are legit outliers. There's a very small percentage of men that have those, but most of the guys are in the middle. So if you're within that, that 5-inch category somewhat, you're probably going to be fine. And the thing is, women can't measure, right? If women like ask a woman,
hold on, let me pull out a rules.
Right? Women don't do that, right? If you ask a woman like, okay, hey, measure, you're going to put a bookshelf in, like how big is that? They don't pull out a tape measure. They go like this, right? They go, oh, it's about this big. Like women don't know. So when women are like, oh, I need a guy who's 6 foot tall, like they don't know how tall 6 feet is half the time. They just want a guy who's taller than them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's like the penis size thing is as long as you're around the average length, as long as you know how to like get her in the right angles, you know how to diddle her bean right, you're gonna work magic, and she's gonna think you're the greatest lover ever. Like women don't care. Women aren't overly thinking about this stuff like guys are. Really good book. One of my holy trinity of dating books is Atomic Attraction by Christopher Canwell, and he talks about the penis study. That's where I learned that one. It's that's a really good book.
Yeah, like I said, it's just being aware, being present, being a big one. I think a lot of guys too is like the more in your head you are, the less aware you are of the signs and signals she's giving you, both in the context, even sexual settings, or even out. And like I said before, the guys are dressing the girls are dressing skimpier. Even then, it's funny when you start to, like with Robert Glover's book, The Dating Essentials for Men, how often when you start to really stop focusing on yourself, learn to just calm down, be chill in your own body. Also, you start to notice it fucking everywhere. I go to the gym now and I'm just like can't guarantee there's a signs and signals, but like I've had plenty of times when I'd be like doing, bench press, and this was one time I'll never forget. It was so funny. I was like bicep curls, like right near the mirror in front of the whole weight rack thing. And off to my left was like where the lower weights were, and then it got heavier as you went to the right. And there was a girl younger girl, but dressed, skimpy as shit, with her, I think her boyfriend there. And the path to put the weights back was way easier to walk behind me to put them back, like the 10-pounders. And she walked in front of me like 4 times in a row. And it's just like, but 5 years ago, I've been like, oh, that must have just been a coincidence that she just happened to do it. But now it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly. She's trying to like either get my attention or piss him off or both.
That's girl game, right? Girls, when they're into you, they put themselves in your proximity, hoping that you'll talk to them. That because women are very passive that way. They don't just come up and talk to you. And a lot of guys are like, why didn't she just come up and say that? Because they're women. They don't do that. Okay, so like that's your job as the man. You're the one supposed to take the initiative,
take the risk. Yeah,
you're supposed to shoot your shot. Women don't do that. They show up, they look pretty. That's girl game. Yeah. Yeah, he also mentions in the book too. He talks about how women will, like a waitress that really likes you, right? She'll bend over a little bit more to give you a cleavage shot. He goes, they know exactly what they're doing. Like they're not, doing that completely oblivious of what they're doing,
What I thought was really funny, because these are the kind of things I hear, and I can imagine someone get like a woman or anybody getting angry and giving pushback to the idea, like, no, we're not bending over. Well, this is, again, I could pull out the biology cards. There's a good book. It's the guy's named Robert Sapolsky. He's a evolutionary biologist. He teaches very, very prominent. I don't think it was in the book, but he mentioned the book was Why Don't Zebras Get Ulcers, and was talking about like the science of stress. But I've watched a couple of his lectures online because he posts everything for free on YouTube. And there's a really funny thing where he mentioned how we've actually observed female like baboons and chimpanzees, if they have a particular like male following them, trying to get her attention, trying to get up, she'll intentionally walk them in front of rival males to get them into a fight. And then while they're spouting and fighting, she'll spend time with the guy she's actually interested in.
Wow. Yeah,
that's it's like literally. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm saying monkeys are doing it. We're not that far off. Like, it's not crazy to think that these kind of things are happening without you realizing it.
Yeah. That's it's a very funny dynamic for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm a little bit tapped out here, but this is a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate it, Paul. This is the Come On Man podcast. What are the books?
So Yeah, my latest book I just released is called The Essential Skills of a Masculine Presence, Psychology Paradigm. This kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about just a second ago, right? Where uh, you're now noticing women when they're checking you out and when they're doing certain things. Most guys are oblivious to this,
Yep.
right? This is what we call the reticular activating system,
Hmm.
right? You can train your mind subconsciously to what's important to you. And a lot of that goes into your paradigm. So if you actually convince yourself, through things like affirmations or journaling or scripting, there's lots of ways of doing it. I talk about in the book. If you tell yourself, I'm an attractive man, right? Women think I'm sexy. Women check me out all the time. Women, right? You convince yourself of this stuff that will engage that reticular activating system, and you'll start noticing it. It's
Hmm.
not that women weren't doing it before; it's that you didn't notice it before, right? So that's something that you can learn with this book. But really, one of the things that we're trying to do with this book is trying to fix some of the masculinity crisis. This book will really help you understand some of the paradigms that aren't serving you, some of the less masculine paradigms that you've probably been told all your life. And a good one we mentioned already is happy wife, happy life, right? That's
Hmm.
it. It's a paradigm that just doesn't work in relationships. And we know this by the divorce rate, right?
Yeah.
So, one of the paradigms that I try to have you embody is that your wife's not your partner. Okay. You need to lead your relationship like a captain executive officer dynamic. If you leave that kind of relationship, you still, she's still a supporting person in your life. She has good ideas. She'll give you things that you can take under advisement. And if she gives you good ideas, there's no reason not to go with it. But you're the captain. You're the one leading the mission. You're the one that's leading the relationship. If you can embody that, you're more likely to have a more healthy relationship. She's going to feel like she's more safe and secure in the relationship and trust your leadership more. So get the book. It's available on Amazon and Audible. And then if you are having any kind of relationship issues, your wife hasn't touched you in 2 years, you're feeling rejected, you're feeling less of a man because of it. A lot of guys really just feel like their wives don't find them attractive anymore. Um, and they almost feel like, well, what am I supposed to do? This is just how life's supposed to be. Life's not supposed to be that way. Okay. So if you're
Hmm.
having problems with that, book a free call with me. I'll give you a free 30-minute call. If you go to call.fixdeadbedrooms.com, we can talk about your specific problems. If I can help you, I will show you what that looks like. And if I can't, I'll at least point you in the right direction.
Awesome. I like that. I like that name. Fix Ed Bedrooms. That's a good one.
It's a big problem, dude. Like after that 7-year mark, like the sex goes downhill, and guys convince themselves, no, that's just how it's supposed to be. Because their wives are like, no, naturally sex slows down after a while. No, not if she really likes you, man.
I'm thinking of a patient of mine. One last thing I'll toss in is like a massage patient of mine. And she mentioned like kind of casually, I think she's in her probably late 50s, early 60s, but she was talking about how she's had, it's kind of like degraded a little bit in the relationship over the past couple of years, but she made efforts to say she lost some female friends, moved away, some passed on, but she's going out to like find other women's groups to be a part of. And she started doing, I think it was like estrogen injections, because she's just like, I want to feel like a teenager again. And like my husband fucking loves it. But it was nice to see her saying like, I'm taking initiative to acknowledge that this is not healthy for
Yeah.
him or for me, and I do something. And so it's awesome to see that people are like, at least people are talking about it more,
Yeah.
to kind of break this paradigm of thinking like, well, that's just how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to just be miserable
Well,
until the day you die. And then
yeah.
realizing, no, there's things out there you can do.
Well, a lot of guys
Absolutely.
too, they have this idea of, I need to fix her. If she just loved me more, if she just put out more, it's like, no. You can't make what other people do at other things. Okay. You can only fix yourself. You can only control how you show up in the relationship. And what you'll find is most guys don't know how to lead and set the tone in the relationship. They're doing unattractive things. They're doing all the wrong things. And if you just fix some of that stuff, your wife naturally comes on board,
Yeah.
you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, and I recommend, because as men, we're supposed to be the leaders in the relationship. So you need to be the one that takes the initiative here. But only 3% of guys actually will take action to fix their marriages. The rest of them will just let it die a slow, agonizing death, and it's really sad. And then they wonder why women file for 80% of the divorces. It's because you let that happen, bro. Okay, let's fix that
Yeah.
shit. Let's fix it.
Yeah. When I hear people say like it just came out of nowhere, I'm like, I'm pretty sure if I looked back in your history, I see signs fucking everywhere.
There would be signs
Everywhere.
everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Paul, thank you so much for this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime.